we're building intelligence and automation capabilities more powerful, less predictable, and much less controllable than anything humanity has ever unleashed previously. So we've moved past hackers. The adversary is AI itself in many cases.
Phishing used to be really easy to spot unless you were either really stupid or you just weren't really looking at what you were reading. Now it's getting really tough.
AI writes the phishing layers, it cracks the passwords, it bypasses captures, and even personalizes the bait.
If you're doing phishing without AI, your success rate is around 10, maybe 15%. They found it goes up to above 50 if you're using AI.
North Korean groups have already been caught using deepfakes to apply for jobs at Western companies, we know that. Literally putting AI-generated faces in Zoom calls.
So the first candidate forgot to switch the AI on. So I had a North Korean gentleman there pretending to be from the Czech Republic. Yeah. AI excels at translation, language generation, media, not automation or decision intelligence. We have to bring this up. There are no incidents of actual true intelligent automation around.
The attackers don't publish white papers. The reports that we read are a lag. So malware like Firewood have shown self-evolving adaptive behaviors, rewriting themselves to survive. That's autonomy in everything but name. It's good enough to outpace humans at finding vulnerabilities. And that's all the attackers need, I would say. So yes,
a breach is not one vulnerability. You have to evade all of the defenses. You have to get to the end of the attack. And I think that if you've built up infrastructure where something brute forces its way through, it's not going to be helpful.
Oh, contentious. Hello and welcome to another edition of Razorwire. When AI attacks. We've been doing a lot of different content on AI periodically. One of the things that I genuinely enjoy discussing is the concept of what happens when the bad guys get hold of AI. They've got access to the same resources we do, a lot less morals, and we do know that they're currently using their own dark AI, dark side of the AI. I don't know how to describe it, but I know two people who can help me out with this one. So please feel free to follow us on this journey down this rabbit hole of when AI attacks. What happens when the bad guys get it? So who else would I get to come and have a chat with me around all things bad guys, AI, hypotheticals, what's going on at the moment, where we think that side of the industry is going? Because let's face it, I don't think you can go through any podcast these days without coming across some kind of powered by AI. Everything's powered by AI. Every security tool is powered by AI. But let's talk about the bad guys for a bit. And together with the dream team who always come to talk about this kind of stuff, we have Oliver Rochford and Richard Cassidy. Which of you would like to do your intros first? Let's go with Richard.
Well, AI in the hands of the bad guys when it goes dark, it isn't something that's coming. It's already here. MIT Sloan and Safe Security, thanks to some research done by my learned colleague, analyzed nearly 3,000 ransomware cases, and they found that 80% had AI in the kill chain. So 4 out of 5. If you throw that maths. I guess what this means in practice is attackers are using AI to automate really the hardest parts of their jobs, and that's nothing new. Automation back in the days of machine learning, which is still a core part of AI, was always in there. So AI writes the phishing layers, it cracks the passwords, it bypasses captures, and even personalizes the bait. But the research, shows that ransomware now involves AI in the kill chain. So it's like putting human attackers on steroids, I guess. They don't need to scale manually anymore. The machine does it for them. Now, this is chilling as well. I mean, North Korean groups have already been caught using deepfakes to apply for jobs at Western companies. We know that. Literally putting AI-generated faces in Zoom calls, right? And they have passed the interviews. They get access to internal systems, and then they go and do what they do best, right? Exfiltrate data, plant backdoors. And this is not fiction, right? It's actually happening in recruitment departments right now, quite actively. I guess the other point to mention is a harmless academic prototype of AI ransomware, right? Nicknamed Prompt Lock, caused a reasonable panic when it was uploaded to VirusTotal. because security firms thought it was real. And that just shows how close the gap is between lab work and what potentially could be real world attacks. And I would want to finish on one statement for the intro is Mo Gaudat. He's somebody I follow, previously chief business officer at Google X. He's put it bluntly, we're almost creating a god of sorts. And I don't think he was exaggerating. I mean, he's warning that we're building intelligence and automation capabilities more powerful, less predictable, and much less controllable than anything humanity has ever unleashed previously. So we've moved past hackers. The adversary is AI itself in many cases.
Another report from a risk management firm called Resilience, they found that, because we were talking about the volume of attacks. So does it work? So they found that essentially, if you're doing phishing without AI, your success rate is around 10, maybe 15%. They found it goes up to above 50 if you're using AI. And part of it is, you can imagine, if you're basically a foreign national, you're trying to basically fool people in the US, anything that's going to help you with that. And that's, I think, my second observation is the following, that everything we've outlined so far uses language translation, text generation, and media generation. None of this is decision intelligence, is what I'm saying. This is not automation of attacks. But what's fascinating is the fact that to be useful in defense, we actually have to build something far more sophisticated than the attackers to gain an edge in offense. Because they're already getting quite a lot of value and a lot of impact just out of using these low-hanging use cases, which first in the security business context, I mean, it's great if you can generate a meme, but it's not going to stop a hacker, right? So that's my observation there, the fact that in the moment, it's enabled offense cheaper, more effectively than defense.
Well, it's about skilling up, really, isn't it? And let's face it, we're constrained by morals, and they are not constrained by morals. A lot of the tools that we use have restrictions on them. And especially if you're in the security field, it is kind of a little bit difficult, because sometimes when you're trying to utilize it to kind of give you something like even talking points for a podcast, or, some ideas for new additional podcasts, sometimes you do get outputs where it says, sorry, I can't really talk about that or discuss that in any great length. And it's like, hang on a minute. This is the kind of stuff we need to talk about. We need to be able to get information on, because if we don't get any information, we're kind of just waiting for the first wave of attacks that will flood over us like a typhoon. Then we're always playing catch up afterwards. It's a really difficult subject matter. I mean, you've got whole LLMs now, or what they call dark LLMs. That's the term, isn't it? Out there. And we talked about that, a year ago on one of this podcasts around, what the potential is, making things easier. Obviously, the whole phishing stuff as well, as you quite rightly pointed out. Phishing used to be really easy to spot unless you were either really stupid or you just weren't really looking at what you were reading. Now it's getting really tough. I got a DocuSign one the other day that was really difficult. I had to seriously think about what I was looking at. Myself, 30 years in the industry, look at it and think, geez, is that real? Is that genuine? And I can't tell myself. Getting to the point now where I just don't trust anything that's coming through my email. I mean, Oliver, Richard mentioned some, the whole deepfake thing. Didn't you have an experience? Are you willing to share your experience that you had with the North Korean deepfakes?
So essentially, we were hiring a developer, and we started getting a lot of resumes in. And the amazing thing is that because a lot of the candidates are all using GPT to create their CVs, now you can't tell the proper ones apart from the not proper ones. They look basically identical, right? Because what they do is they basically take your job spec, they take a resume, and it tailors it. And we noticed this by the fact that invariably every single developer had exactly the tool stack that we were looking for. So the first candidate forgot to switch the AI on. So I had a North Korean gentleman there pretending to be from the Czech Republic. The second time, this was really bizarre. They must have had someone stood next to them, because they actually looked to the side, and the AI was set up to keep the eyes on the camera. So the whole face distorted, which was really, really strange. And this occurred multiple times.
Well, like something out of the thing.
Yeah, there was language translation going on. I mean, all sorts. So in the third time round, this was really interesting because they were polishing their MO. there were multiple candidates coming along. What they all had in common, that they all pretended to be basically from Central Europe. That was Central or Eastern Europe. That was a commonality there. And on the third time round, it was eerily good, with the exception that you could see that it was an AI face, because somehow the reactions weren't right. The blinking, the you know what I mean? It looked a little bit too plastic in the face. Yeah. In the end, they actually hired a Central European person to actually take the interview. So that's the amazing thing as well. They actually have people, but up until then, we had 4 waves before we got to the last person. And obviously, it's the same team on the North Korean side. They know they're basically polishing their MO, or they're just brushing up on mistakes because they have multiple attempts. That was fairly interesting. And yeah, they're using some kind of masking software in the actual video chat, and they're also using some kind of translation software there.
Oh, and the translation's doing it on the fly.
No, slightly delayed, man. I mean, that was a kind of weird thing. Also, this was they brought in the translation software, and this seems to be really weird, after they didn't the first couple of times. As I mentioned, it was almost as though they were improving, or as though they were throwing more resources at it to get a higher gain of success. It was really strange.
It's no different than development anyway. You know, you do something, it doesn't quite work, you carry on, you refine it a bit, then over time you get better and better and better. And it's the same with deepfakes. I mean, I saw videos a year ago and they look slightly dodgy, but you know, President Trump holding up a convenience store along with Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, and it was it's all completely fake. But nowadays it's if they're tying software to change your voice, software to change your face, and software to translate, I mean, it's getting good quick.
How did we fool them in the end, when it was getting really good? We asked about their location that they claimed to have been, and it was the strangest reply I ever heard. How is Prague? It's very free. Not the type of thing you generally hear from someone who grows up in the West, is it? It's how you'd imagine it to be if you're living in a gulag.
North Korea.
Yeah.
It's very free. Yeah, it probably is a lot freer than where you are at the moment.
Yeah, but it was a strange process and eerie, and I could only extrapolate that this must be going on a massive scale because we're a small company. But I think what really threw them was the fact that we were very restrictive and said we were only hiring in Europe. If we'd have said globally, they might have just taken a more direct route, to be honest.
Yeah, I have an interesting story from, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but my brother, he was on an online dating site and he was conversing with this lady from somewhere in the world. I won't be too specific. One thing led to another, and he sent me a video that she had sent him of her in this location. And he was just bragging about how beautiful she was and that they're getting on really well. And it turns out that she said she lived in the Philippines. And when I saw the video, what I saw was Filipino-looking lady, fair enough, but snow-capped mountains in the background. Now, I've never traveled to the Philippines, but I'm pretty sure that you don't get snow-capped mountains in the Philippines in summer. So I said to my brother, I'm not sure that video's true. How long have you been talking to this woman? And it's been a couple of months. They'd even exchanged some messages, and he'd even sent some Bitcoin, which had all the red flags of this is a scam, to help her with flights to come and see him. And I said, I think you've been scammed. And I said, just go ask Google about snow-capped mountains in the Philippines in summer. He messaged me back about 5 minutes later going, oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. I cannot believe I fall for this. And so, they're tugging at the heartstrings as well. AI and the dark side of AI can be used in that way. But when we talk about the dark side of technology, it's definitely not abstract, right? We're already seeing it hit where it does hurt most. And it's not just in the business, it's also families. And first of all, in business, let's talk about that. AI has definitely lowered the barrier for entry for attackers. We would hopefully agree with that. You no longer need the nation-state budgets of old to launch very sophisticated campaigns, do you? You just essentially need access to some tools and a generative model and some stolen data, preferably. and then you can start doing AI generated things with that. All right. But the corporate world isn't the only battlefield that we're really sitting on. And we've all been thrust onto the front lines of cyber warfare. We're just in it. But look at gaming as well, right? The digital playground for our kids. Europol flagged that AI is now being used in grooming and exploitation. So bots that convincingly pose as though they're children and generate this convincing dialogue, and essentially try to get kids to, visit places to get extra, whatever it is, Robux, or you name the currency. And there's malicious code hidden in downloadable elements. And parents aren't in any way educated to spot the difference. Not even I, as somebody that would consider myself reasonably well versed in this area, can easily spot this. And most platforms can't either. So the point is that, AI and the adversaries, to your earlier conversation, doesn't respect boundaries, right? And the same techniques that empty a CFO's bank account will also reach into our living rooms through gaming consoles. So, and when something can cross those boundaries so easily, the way I see it, it's not just a cyber problem anymore. It's actually a social one.
Indeed. I mean, I track, so obviously I have a news analysis company. We do disinformation trend tracking. And one of the topics which we're looking at is just what we call signs of future shock. So there's a futurist in the 70s put out a book called Future Shock. And he said, these are basically symptoms of when technological pace exceeds society's ability to adapt. And one of the outlier phenomena that was identified was basically the rise of AI spirituality. And you mentioned, on non-cyber damage, there's a whole bunch of AI-driven cults, basically drawing people in to essentially, once again, monetize it. That's usually the thing, basically take control of them. So even that is like something which is actually increased. And there's reporting on it, the fact that there, I would say, cults which are being created using GPT, which are designed to really draw people in and then get money out of them. So that's something which has increased too. And if you want to really go down the rabbit hole, look into the Zizians. So the group of rationalists who basically got really, really deeply into AI doomerism, and they've ended up basically having a couple of members who have ended up shooting a policeman and so on in the US. So they've been radicalized by the topic itself. That's Zizian, Z-I-A-N-S. And so there's obviously a huge impact societally going on here, because I guess a lot of people can't really rationalize this. They don't know how to integrate this into their, yeah.
It's a really good point. Just because that's a point that I hold close to my heart, right? The bigger, darker challenge for humanity is the speed of innovation and our inability to keep up with that. I mean, look at history. We've said this in previous podcasts. Right, we learned to split the atom, and within a decade, we had weapons capable of ending the world, right? I know we haven't, thankfully. We built social media to connect the world. And within years, it was undermining democracies and creating mental health epidemics, right? So time and time again, we invent faster than we control or regulate. And even more so with AI, we're deploying faster than we can understand. And AI is moving at pace, right? The numbers are even more sensational. Right, ChatGPT reached 100 million users in just 2 months. We know that. That's faster than any other consumer tech in history. But companies are now embedding AI into supply chains, finance systems, and healthcare without fully grasping the risks. Agentic AI is another good example of that. But why are we doing it, right? We have to understand that. And it's fundamentally competition. Our psychology, and it's based on lots of great studies, this isn't just my view, is hardwired for the race. And every business wants to be first to market, right? Every nation wants to dominate the AI arms race that we're currently in, right? And everyone is sprinting forward, which is great. But the AI race is the new space race, but it has even higher stakes. And that's a quote from Kai-Fu Lee, right? So the problem with races is in a sprint, no one will stop to check if the track ends at a massive void or potentially a cliff that we're going to jump off. And so we're headed into a future not by what AI can do, but how recklessly we're going to push it. So countries are already weaponizing AI in warfare, right? And I don't have specifics of that, but we know that military agencies are using it actively to to automate the battlefield, and that's cyber and both physical. And we're seeing it a lot in surveillance and so on and so forth. And corporations are embedding models into critical systems, often with very minimal oversight and no real surgical auditability. And that's a big challenge. So if there's one thing I guess we need to drop, it's the parochial narratives we have, right? One thing we can't afford to frame as country versus country race. It's AI. We have to be able to work on it better. I'm not saying I have the answer, because we've talked about this before. How do you fix it? What's that look like? I don't know. But as a technology, the dark side of it isn't just in the code. It's actually in our inability to put the brakes on.
AI psychosis, that's another one of these phenomena. We have the radicalization. We have people basically fall into fraud and so on. You add all of this up, all of these are going to end up in some way as an attack vector, whether through hacktivism, whether through some of your employees turning into insider threats because they're colluding or being, basically extorted and so on. So I think it's all highly interrelated. For us, well, I mean, you mentioned a great data point earlier around the ransomware 2000, attacks where 81% are powered by artificial intelligence, and that same report said that actually what has changed is that only 12% of victims pay, compared to 22% last year, and the main reason is because of recovery plans and backups. And I think there's a fundamental truth there that a lot of our resilience against AI-based attacks in the moment are going to come through good cyber hygiene. Phishing aside, because they've actually enhanced their capability, it's become more sophisticated. Everywhere else, it is not. It will prey on the weak. And I think a good example of this is automated attacks. So we've just had Expo. That was like the project which just made the rounds of reports a few weeks back. So there's basically a LLM project or an AI project which is #1 on the leaderboard for HackerOne, the bug bounty findings.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah. However, every single result is vetted by humans. They don't just pass it through. It's not entirely fully automated. They admit it still makes lots of mistakes. So there you go. If you ran this on an actual real-world network, it would be basically like some blind person hammering against the door. It would not be subtle. It would be very brute forced, right? This is a script kiddie's dream come true. If I'd have had this 20 years ago, because I'm terribly bad at coding, I would have loved this. But it's a script kiddie's dream come true. And of course, I think that's the other interesting to say about when it comes to fully autonomous attacks, there's nothing. There's nothing really out there that has been proven, either on the defender side. And when we talk about companies deploying this, I collect the reports where they backpedal. So there's a whole bunch of reports of companies throwing out their customer services and bringing it back in. Like if somebody wants that list, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to provide it. But there's a growing number of these kind of reports and incidents. So we have to separate out, because to me, what's really interesting is that AI excels at translation, language generation, media, not automation or decision intelligence. We have to bring this up. There are no incidents of actual true intelligent automation around yet.
Do we know of?
Yet. That we know of yet. But based on the foundation, based on known foundation models, it is currently not feasible. Unless there's somewhere black box in the lab somewhere that we don't know about,
And so we wander back into a previous conversation where I, told you I'd be more than happy to provide the creative to my own AI in my own head, attached by some kind of cable and what have you, in some kind of transhumanist kind of way. But I mean, you paint some really interesting points there, both of you guys. There's a lot to unpack with everything that we just went through.
Can I just jump in on Ollie's last point? Right. So I hear the point about there being no proven fully autonomous AI attacks in the wild. I think we have to be honest. We're fooling ourselves if we say they don't exist. And let me expand. Firstly, what we call autonomy today, I guess, blurs the lines. So malware like Firewood and the new Mirai variants have shown self-evolving adaptive behaviors, rewriting themselves to survive. We've seen a lot of that in the latest models around OpenAI, exhibiting behaviors that are abnormal, trying to protect itself. So that's autonomy in everything but name. But second, to one of the points we made, attackers don't publish white papers, right? The reports that we read are a lag of reality, and sometimes by months, if not by years. I mean, remember prompt block It was a lab prototype uploaded for testing that triggered a global panic. I said that earlier. But that's how close the gap is between theory and reality in my experience. And the third point is expose AI. You're right, just top tackle one's leaderboard by autonomously finding vulnerabilities faster than human hackers. And you're right, it's like a blind man hitting a door. But that's an example of what's out there. But the bit that's interesting is, and the final point is, let's not forget the geopolitical angle. Nation states have both the motivation and the budgets to experiment with autonomy, whether it's for cyber warfare or sabotage or disinformation, whatever you think it might be. If we've learned anything in the cybersecurity years that we've been in it, I would suggest it's that by the time we see it in the open, it's already been running in the shadows. So I don't think we can say with confidence the fully autonomous attacks aren't out there. The truth is, I would say that we just don't know. And, you got to look at the combining AI speed, with all the adaptability and the scale that adversaries have with no moral code. I think, you've got to bet on that uncertainty because that's what it looks like. So
no, so betting on uncertainty is not what risk quantification does. But most of all, the foundation models just aren't there. Scaling hasn't increased in 2 years. I'm sorry, no one's got this working in any circumstance, not in cyber, not anywhere else. And so generally, I would say that there's a limit which is imposed by the core foundational technology here, which no one's released anything out there. And I'd argue that if you're going to invest in military tech right now, it's more to do with drones, because that's really the big risk there. So I would really expect black money to go in that direction. But I think this is a question of timing. I think this is a longer time frame, and you think it's a shorter one.
Yeah.
Oh, contentious.
Yes. Good.
Your point on foundational models not being there yet, with respect, misses the point. So they don't need to be general AI to be dangerous, right? Look at Expose stuff again, right? Expose AI topping HackerOne. It's not conscious, it's not perfect, we know that, but it's good enough to outpace humans at finding vulnerabilities, and that's all the attackers need, I would say. So yes,
a breach is not one vulnerability. You have to evade all of the defenses. You have to get to the end of the attack, and I think that if you've built up infrastructure, if something brute forces its way through, it's not going to be subtle, because it doesn't know. Well, it's not going to be subtle. It doesn't know its network. It's going to have to do all of the normal recon and everything else, and that's where you have a chance to detect it, like any traditional attack. Let's not pretend that AI is going to create magic bullets here. It's still constrained by the standard protocols. Everything else that we see in a normal attack, it doesn't eliminate those. It still abides by those rules.
If you talk about traditional attacks in the sense of lots of different steps to go through in the kill chain, sure, but if we talk about just getting the right identity and then logging in, you don't need to go through multiple steps with an AI tool to get that identity. You can automate that.
But that's just a more sophisticated automation. We already have scripts doing that,
No, but with AI there are AI tool sets where you can actively scrape data, look at it, try out a social engineering attack, look at its effectiveness or responses, rewrite, keep going, rinse, repeat until you get what you need. All automated. Doesn't need, once you've got agentic AI doing its thing, you don't actually need to get involved until you've got the identity. And that's what I'm saying. You are right. There are parts within AI where we just can't get a fully autonomous point yet. But there are other parts of the attack vectors where we can get fully autonomous.
We were able to create fully autonomous processes before that without AI. So to me, this is just an increase in sophistication. It's not a brand new threat.
I'm just processing that. I'm just processing that.
I'm just pausing because I think it's a good pause point.
No, I think I just pause for effect. I mean, my producer keeps telling me we need more arguments on the channel because everybody in InfoSec seems to always agree. It's good, and it's good to have both viewpoints. I think. Oh man, I mean, what to unpack? I just added like 15 more things to unpack.
I might eat humble pie next month. I don't know, but
I think a lot of us, we have an idea of where things are. There are things that we know and there are things that we don't know. And when it comes, I'll go back to something I mentioned earlier on. When it comes to the dark side of AI, going over to the dark side with no morals, more money, more budget, more security, because there's a vested interest in security, Oliver. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've just scammed $20 million out of somebody and you spend 10 million of it on your further development of your own LLM model, and then 10 million of it, obviously maybe 5 million on a new mansion, but then 5 million on security, you're about 1,000,000% above most normal organizations on the field of security who spend £5 on a pickled egg and hope for the best. That's not to say that organizations should spend millions and millions on security, just a little bit more than sticking some endpoint on, or God forbid, and for those of you out there that love Microsoft, I honestly mean this, utilizing Defender as your endpoint security is just asking for trouble. The guys on the bad side of things, they're not idiots. They're using it to augment what they know and what they're doing and all the rest of it, to do the grunt work, to build, better, dare I say the word AI agent? Yes, I just did anyway, so sod it, I'm doing it anyway. Orchestrating a selection of AI agents to do different tasks that can then sort of like feed into one central kind of location, be it a human being or future maybe an AI orchestrating it with a human being conducting the orchestra again on that level higher than that. It just makes things quicker. It makes things faster. I remember many, many years ago just sitting there and watching the port scans that used to happen on firewalls. That's how old I am. Knowing that they were all being conducted manually by some dude or some person in some part of the world. Now, none of these scans are being done by a person initiating that scan, initiating the script that does the scan across millions and millions of IPs that they've harvested. But they're not doing the grunt work that, dare I say it, traditional hackers and crackers used to do. And the bar, and something that you mentioned earlier on, the bar to entry is dramatically dropping when you can utilize, just general AI to kind of teach you security, and then you just flip it on its head, and that pretty much, gives you the life cycle of what you need to do. Once you get access to one of those dark LLMs, it's not going to have any qualms about telling you what you want to know, or, and it's just going to speed things up. I mean, we're already starting to see, the very developers who developed a lot of this are starting to put themselves out of work. It's not going to take long. I'm sorry if you're in development, I really am. But now that we've got the level of technology we have when it comes to AI, you're doing yourselves out of a job within the next couple of years, or a lot of you anyway. Because again, like the bad guys orchestrating a load of AIs, you'll have a lot of different AIs developing different code, and you'll just be pulling it together and checking it.
So I have an analogy, right? So
here we go.
I think actually we're in the Bronze Age of AI, and I'll tell you why, right? So when the first bronze weapons were basically built exactly the same as the stone weapons, because you couldn't hammer them. You had to basically create a mold, and they had to fit into the same handles that the stone axes had to. That didn't change until they got iron, right? And if you ask me right now, when I see people trying to shoehorn AI into their existing processes and attacks and defenses, we're basically trying to create this, the same as a stone axe-shaped bronze piece, putting it into the handle, because the AI actually isn't strong enough, still too brittle, too soft to actually do most of that work. I don't think we're going to reach that Iron Age point in the next couple of years. However, I do think that in the sense that Richard might be right, is that right now people haven't really designed attacks to make the most of AI. They're trying to use AI to sharpen basically the blade. They're not building a brand new weapon out of it. And I think that's something which we might see in certain areas where you can, my greatest fear isn't a smart AI, it's a dumb AI, and we have something like SQL Slammer or Morris Worm event. That's actually my worst fear, because the AI isn't smart enough. Yeah.
So in essence, you're saying we're right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when we were trying desperately to create a load of machines to do the hard work, but it was failing rather terribly until we learned better techniques. And that's kind of where we are. I mean, let's face it, we're tooling up. We don't know what we're doing, and we are trying to hammer a very wobbly shaped peg into a round hole. But eventually we will craft that peg that goes not perfectly, but reasonably into that hole, and then utilize what comes out of it to make it even better. I mean, look at the Industrial Revolution. Mass production was a blessing and a curse. It was a curse for those people with jobs, as we're currently finding out with a lot of people using AI for support. Like, I want to pay my gas bill. Well, speak to the AI and it'll help you do that. Whereas before you had like 100 people, now you have 20 people, because the 20 people are only dealing with the hard things that the AI can't deal with. But it's going to be the same on the dark side of things. They're going to be utilizing what they know to hone the machine until the machine starts to get really, really good. But it's going to speed up as well. I mean, the Industrial Revolution, people thought there was going to be many, many years of jobs and what have you before it would become a real serious issue. And then, of course, boom, everything happened far quicker than they ever thought could. And what happened? They went, we went pretty much into the Great Recession, didn't we?
Counter argument: the Industrial Revolution took between 80 to 170 years, depending on which historian you ask, because the first steam engine, the Watt steam engine, was actually designed to pump out water from mines. That was in 1760. But it's a better analogy, because I hate the iPhone analogy, because the iPhone did not have to create a brand new supply system. It was just a better phone. Everything was existing. ATMs are my favorite example. So when I was a kid, banks were analog. They've now gotten to the point where they've basically automated away 90% of the jobs. That's taken 40-something years. We had multiple waves of layoffs, different technologies of ATMs until this happened, until we came up with digital banking. This was not a quick event. It took a long time. And AI is going to have a similar path.
Yeah, but at the same time, don't we have that kind of, the speed up of returns and the fact that...
No, yes, of course, but that doesn't mean to say it happened in 6 months. Like, what time?
I'm not saying it happened in 6 months, but I'm just saying my point is everything started out pretty primitive at the beginning, and then as you got better at creating tools, in that case, because it was all physical stuff, the tooling got better, the machines would last longer, they wouldn't break down as well. That machinery got better with each generation, and each generation created the next generation until you ended up with a whole industry where, if you want nails, you can mass produce nails, whereas before you'd have somebody forging the damn things, and each one was different.
And if you take a step back and look over 170 years, that's correct. But if you take a look there were plateaus and ups and downs. It's not just a straight line. This is not just a continuous, and that's what I mean. So impatience is not an actual business driver. There are limits to this, including institutional inertia. The biggest problem right now is actually companies' policies adapting, and that just takes time. These are friction points. All of these will mean that this goes much slower than anyone anticipated. Anthropic CEO said 6 months ago, today code would only be developed by AI. 18 months ago, we had that gentleman from OpenAI with a situation awareness paper who believed we were going to build a brand new nuclear supply infrastructure by now. We're generally good at predicting the future. We're terrible at predicting the time. And I agree with you on that one. Be more patient here. This is not going to happen in 18 to 24 months. There are actual challenges and problems that have to be solved. They can all be solved, but none of them just go like that.
None of them go like that, no. Richard, do you want to enter into this? Turned out to be a nice big argument session.
Good.
I like it. Keep it up. Come on, Richard. I'm handing the baton over to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ollie knows my view on, I'm called the AI sensationalist, I believe.
Optimist.
Optimist and sensationalist now, I guess. Look, I do respect Ollie's view. I mean, that we're still in the Bronze Age. And what we're seeing is more automation and full autonomy. But I don't think we actually know how close we are to the next leap, genuinely. AI isn't progressing like the Industrial Revolution with respect. And, we're just by a long period of time. It's moving at what is genuinely, and I can use this term without feeling cringy, machine speed. And Geoffrey Hinton, right? We know the so-called godfather of AI, said that these things can get more intelligent than us and take control. And that's sensationalist to some extent, who knows? But he didn't put his finger on a particular timeline. He said it's because the pace was already outstripping our ability to govern and, in some respects, understand it. And And Sam Altman as well, right? His worst fear was that AI would cause significant harm to the world. And that's from the person that's sort of actively involved in this. And if he can't tell you where the line is between safe automation and dangerous autonomy, then, I don't think we can. And so, let's compare where we are and what's happened. We've talked about some of the things here, success in phishing, the growth and adoption of AI and things like this, and some examples of that, because it's important to do that. I mean, AI adoption of organizations, right? A study by McKinsey found that last year alone, 78% of organizations reported using AI, at least one business function. That was up 55% from the year before. And there's lots of good growth rates predicted, right? That we're going to be up by 20% each year. And actually, the reality was we'd let between 55 and 70% in many sectors. So I think at that level of innovation growth, it's going to be really hard to say what we think the timelines are going to be. But we do know that it's going to be something we've never really kind of dealt with before. And I guess the reality for me is AI leaders themselves are telling us we don't really know, we're worried. And they are making some predictions. And you're right, Ollie, some have never come to fruition yet, and others have been under-predicted. But the risks are certainly where we're all in the same boat. We understand that they're coming quicker than the safeguards are. So I would say if we can't afford to anchor ourselves in this comfort of the Bronze Age analogies, because the future's arriving much, much more quickly.
I just want to add in there, to add fuel to this fire. Look, on the dark side of this particular fence, right, more money is being spent by far, because it's far more lucrative to be a criminal in a digital age than it is to be in any other business, unless you're in something particularly large. And those large companies, and let's face it, I hear this all the time. People say to me, "Oh, large companies must have good security." After I finish laughing and spitting my pint halfway across the pub, you realise when you actually think about it, and you read some of the stuff that's coming out of the darker side of the web, that they are investing far more in technology and far more in the securing of that technology than our commercial and government bodies. Our government bodies are, dependent in the West at least on private companies to do this for them, who are, doing it for a profit. And they've got a lot of other concerns and a lot of other things that are going on. And the dark side, you don't have the HR problems, the compliance problems, all the other problems that commercial organizations have. And they're spending far more on improving their attack patterns and the way that they attack and the quality of their LLMs than feasibly somebody who sits there and debates for 6 months about, what shall we allow our LLM to talk about on certain, social issues and what have you. The hackers just sat there, the hacker equivalent is sat there going, F it. Just open up the floodgates. Just let it do anything you ask it to do. Sod it. If it wants to generate code that could be used obviously that's what we want it to do. So go ahead and do it. Whilst we're all sitting there debating about whether the icon for the mobile app is cornflower blue or periwinkle green, they've already developed a whole entire stack of automation for known vulnerabilities that can be utilized by artificial intelligence in much the same way as vulnerability scanning and CTEM these days, but with far less morals about going in and doing it. So we're kind of not going to win, let's be honest, because the moment they get to a really sophisticated set of attacks, not something that has been developed with a VC company who are only pumping certain little amounts of cash in at a regular basis to try and get the most out of it. These people are trying to build something that performs and performs well and doesn't get them caught and earns them the most money possible. And they're not stupid. They may utilize some of the money for the fast cars and all the rest of it, but they're piling it back in because they can see the returns on it are going to be much bigger if they win this particular attack. And that's what my thoughts are.
I talk about this in almost every chance I get at a speaking event. Is more money is being spent on the adversarial side, one would suggest, and I'd say even more so on the military side, but that's a different story. And the incentives are staggering. You're absolutely right. Cybercrime is the third largest economy already, if you were to take all of the cybercrime that occurs. And analysts have said the global cost of cybercrime is about 10 to 12 trillion by the end of this year.
Well, it's more than the drug trade.
Well, I know, and that's the figures we're dealing with. And actually, more interestingly, cyber criminals are actually pulling 1.5 trillion in revenue annually through fraud, ransomware payments, exploit trade. And this is according to Arctic Wolf. So it's a really good study there. So the scale tells you something really, really important, critical, that this isn't just a few, and we know this isn't just a few nation state groups or adversary groups. It's a global economy with investment, with R&D and innovation pipelines. And when I talk about this subject on stage, I try to help the audience understand, no matter how hard you fight this fight, you unfortunately can never fight it as sophisticatedly and as effectively as adversary. So that comes back to Ollie's original point. You've got to understand your resilience status, and what do you care about most? What keeps the lights on, and how do you ring fence that and bounce back from a potential problem? But this isn't about resilience, because when we talk about cybercrime as a service, I've never seen such collaboration in all my years.
Oh, gotcha.
On the dark web, you can run all sorts of stuff. You can send your code off. You can buy. We know this, right? This isn't anything new. But what is kind of new, is interesting, is the cybercrime groups are reinvesting their profits back into tooling and research. And so, how often are we reinvesting profits in an industry when we're trying not to give security more budget? We're trying to, and it's just a really unfair playing field. And so you add AI into the mix, well, it's scary.
Just before I hand over to Oliver on that one, because I know he's probably got something to say on that particular one, don't forget to add to this, they are piling the money back in. It's not like they're paying tax. It's not like they're paying VAT. It's not like they're having to spend all the money on the canteen for those few people who go into the office. This is just raw monetary value they're churning out on and getting in. I wasn't surprised that, you've got development teams and access brokers and all the different kind of aspects of cybercrime are working together and collaborating and paying money between themselves to go and get and do things and all the rest of it. It's its own economy in itself. It's just none of it can be regulated, because if you could, you'd put them all in prison. So you're right. I think, this is going to get difficult. Really, it's already difficult now. Cripes, what is it going to be like when there's proper AI involved? It's going to be impossible. But I'm going to hand over to Oliver. Come on, Oliver. Argue.
6 months ago, most of the news data we were analyzing about AI was basically indicating an acceleration and also a positive sentiment. It's not. When I run the analysis now, we have 14,211 curated articles, right? These are all basically about AI business. Actually, there's a growing chorus of people who are doubting the business value of most of the applications. The MIT study said only 5% yielded any value. Johnson & Johnson released a report that out of all of their projects, about 4 to 6% yielded any value at all. That's about realistic with those typical use cases that we've outlined. I don't expect this to turn into an intelligent automation tool. I'm sorry. The core capability as yet does not exist. However, looking at this as an economic problem, in knowledge work, it has created an economic shift. Hourly billable work, certain knowledge work is not worth what it used to be. There will be an adjustment. We're seeing the same thing in cybersecurity on the attacker side. As you mentioned, attacks have gotten cheaper. However, that doesn't mean to say there's more vulnerable targets. As we've outlined, ransomware payment has actually gone down. So we have to relate what they're doing to the actual, basically, I would say to some kind of impact. And they actually seem to be using a lot of AI to get less impact. Breaches are up, ransomware payments are down. That means that people have shifted to more traditional defenses, disaster recovery, and so on, because detection and response was not effective. And so I think that's one thing keeping in mind. But overall, it's the economics that have shifted here. I think they're in favor of the attacker in the moment, simply because they are able to get more value out of the low state of the tech that it is in the moment. We're going to take longer to be able to utilize it, operationalize it, and so on. That would be my takeaway right now.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about ransomware, you are right. And there's always this rhetoric going around about banning payment of ransom attacks. But there's more than just ransom attacks over the nicking credit card details. From companies that are doing this, national insurance details. When we say about ransom, I mean, if we talk about ransomware rate encrypts, that's it's not dead; it's still there, but it's kind of gone more towards the kind of individual now rather than the great corporates. It's just enough now to just grab the data and just say, we've got it, we'll release it if you don't give us some money.
I mean, we mentioned about the unskilled attacker, but I'll be honest with you, every observation I've had so far is that power users excel with AI. I'll be honest with you, if I generate some bad code, I recognize it, I know when I can correct it. I don't think that less technical users are able to do that. And I think that's another thing worth noting, that in terms of who this enables, maybe automation enables lesser attackers, but knowledge, the ability to quickly produce stuff, I think actually enables more sophisticated attackers. So coming back to the economics problem again, and it is an economics problem because ultimately we talk about us defending, but in reality, outside of national defense, we are basically like the guys at the supermarket stopping shoplifting. I'm sorry, it's the truth. And so if you think of how much value most supermarkets stick into that, I've done a study, I wrote a whole paper comparing cybercrime economics to that because it's the only data point we have where people are spending to stop a monetary loss through crime. And so I think in many cases we're kind of similar. And so companies want to spend as little as possible. They're trying to reduce the amount of crime, not eliminate 100%. They're trying to disincentivize it. The question is, at which point you really reach optimum, I would say optimum defense without overspending, without hitting diminishing return. I think that's what AI has also shifted,
So I've just been called a security guard.
I joke about that. I say, where else do we let security guards and engineers loose on nation-state actors? Only in cybersecurity.
But you're not wrong. You aren't wrong. That's the annoying thing. That's the really annoying thing. I've been accused of being the digital version of a security guard at the front, the front gate before. Luckily not recently. But it's an interesting track. I mean, for final thoughts, because I know you're both very, very busy people and probably have to leave. Is there anything anybody out there should be watching out for at the moment, or is it a case of just look after your defense in depth, do as best as you can with what you've got, and just keep good backups and hope for the best? Or is there something specifically we can do? Or is it a kind of watch this space? It's kind of a bit of everything, in my opinion, right about now.
Well, gosh, this is a big question it could be a very long answer, but look, I'll try to simplify it as best I can, because there's lots of elements to the AI challenge on what we should do about it. But I guess where I would start is we have to accept, and I'm sure we all do by now, that prevention alone won't cut the mustard. We all agree that attackers only need to be right. Once you've heard this a lot. So there's a couple of things we should be doing as businesses. Let's assume that AI is in the kill chain. Whether you see it or not, treat every incident as if AI may be amplifying the attacker. To Oliver's point, increased sophistication. And what does that mean? Well, that means you've got to do testing of your own environment as adversarially as you possibly can. So, prompt injecting testing for LLMs and red teaming that's using AI-powered phishing, for example, and get tabletop exercises running so that your staff and your teams can understand this kind of new wave of what's going on. I want to go back to an early point that Oliver mentioned around data resilience and recovery. It's the only way your business is going to survive. And agentic AI is a good example of that. We're going to be running down the agentic AI sort of pathway, but rolling back to a non-error state is going to be very difficult to do. And yes, there are technologies you can look at, but companies aren't thinking about what happens when agentic AI processes go wrong. So that's part of resilience. How can you roll that back? The other challenge, and I always like to talk to the CISOs part of this, is that board level risk framing is really important here. We've got to tie it to outcomes for the board, and why we've got to invest more in understanding how we can withstand AI-based attacks, detect them, and meet sophistication. and educate them in AI phishing campaigns and how that can wipe millions off the value of the company in minutes. Or there's deep fake stuff that we've been talking about around, North Koreans potentially getting into the workforce and then stealing data, and how we can use technology better to find those things. So it's kind of a category shift in the mindset, right? We don't need to ask anymore, do we have good security? What we have to say, and what the question should be, is, are we resilient when AI is being used against us, and how do we do that from a technology perspective? And there's no one answer. It depends on what your business is doing and how you look at it.
I suppose for the North Korean thing, a good one is, how do you feel about Kim Jong-un? Because he's going to have somebody next to him overlooking what he's doing, and he can't be not positive, but he can't be too positive. So what does he do? Psychology.
It's a strange question in an interview. You're basically giving away that at that point. But what you need to do is, if you actually want to trigger them, you have to start talking bad about the great leader and see how they respond.
Indeed, that's a great point.
Could
you put up memes in the chat of the various Western memes of Kim Jong-un, just see what happens. But anyway, that's for another podcast on how to defend yourself against North Korean deepfakes, which actually I might actually do, because it sounds quite like a fun exercise. Oliver, any last kind of thoughts on what Richard has said, and then we'll do the lead out.
Look, I know for a lot of folks, AI fatigue has set in terms of covering the news. There's so much going on, but situational awareness is really crucial at the moment. There's a lot of, we talk about disinformation and fake information with AI. There's a lot of fake information about AI. There's a lot of misinterpreted information about AI. Coming back to that malware sample, if you only saw the first report, you now think there's AI-enabled malware. If you didn't catch the follow-up, and I think that's an important thing to note, a lot of these sensational articles, there is a retraction or follow-up often afterwards. That doesn't get the same coverage. And so keep an eye out for that. Secondly, a lot of these tools are prototypes. They're lab projects in the moment, meaning you can download them and test them. Take a look. Don't take someone else's word about how great or how bad these are. Take it for play, test it in your lab. And as Richard said, when you start doing your risk modeling, you start doing your risk analysis, start considering AI in the scenarios, how this would look if this was amped up. How would this attack look if it were amplified by X, if it were Y% better? Would you still fare well? I think that's a good way of approaching it, because rather than saying AI can do X, same as automation, I don't assume we're going to automate everything in 10 years. I have scenarios. What does the world look like if we automate 10% more? What does the world look like if we automate 30% more? What does the world look like if we automate 50% more? Approach it that way, because we don't know how much better this is going to get or how much quicker. You can just run assumptions. This is like any other tabletop exercise,
Plus, you're also making sure that you're catering for any kind of weird evolutionary sudden leaps, because that does happen. Suddenly somebody has a eureka moment and boom, everything gets significantly more frightening. There was one thing you definitely said that was right. We don't know the timescales on this one. It could be long, it could be short. We can predict, but we don't actually really know.
Punctuated equilibrium, it's a term from evolution where basically you have periods of stability and then chaos, then stability and chaos. And if you look at technological evolution, Ted, if you go back out and you flatten the line, it looks really straight. It is not. It's like that. It's really jagged, and there's plateaus in it. And we're living through this, and everything is really hyped up, which makes it seem as though it's really fast and accelerated. But that's because we're still playing catch up.
And it's still, it's kind of where the UK is politically as well at the moment. Anyway, that's another subject entirely that we don't cover on this channel. Thank you ever so much, Oliver and Richard, for exploring the dark side of AI with us today. It's absolutely fantastic. There's definitely loads and loads of content here, and we'll try to keep everybody updated as things move, be it fast, slow, or, whatever. It's going to be a key concern for us going forward. And let's be honest, things have been a lot different in that market now than they were 2 years ago. So who knows where we're going to be in 2 years and what we're going to be discussing. So thank you ever so much, guys. And to all of you out there, thank you so much. We've got over, nearly 15,500 subscribers. We keep going up by about 1,000 subscribers every 30 odd days, just over. Thank you ever so much. If you're not subscribed, then please subscribe. It helps the channel grow. And press like on the like button. We have a massively good like ratio to the good side of the fence rather than the bad side of the fence. Please feel free to click that thumbs up. It helps us get onto the algorithm, because we do talk about stuff like we have today, which tends to get shadow banned. So if you like the video, it'll help us out immeasurably. Thank you ever so much, and we'll see you again soon.